Hello, thank you for attending today's webinar, Go for the Gold, the Key to Product Master Data Management Success. My name is Hollis Woodlock and I will be the moderator during today's meeting. Today, Michael is going to discuss the key elements of a successful Product MDM project, how product content quality can make or break your implementation, and the steps required to establish and maintain high-quality gold product content. So with that, let's get started. Michael, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Hollis. Hello, my name is Mike Negron. I'm a principal consultant with Codifyd. I've spent 12 years in online content management and MDM implementation. Previously worked with the McMaster Car Supply, where we took a 100-year-old print catalog company with 500,000 different items from about $11 million in online sales to roughly $250 million online sales over 6 years. I led a team of copywriters, IT folks, in that initiative. Beyond that, I've also got experience in buy and sell side, managing physical distribution for McMaster Car as well as print catalog product merchandising. So I understand not only online merchandising, but the whole sort of package from print to distribution as well. And sort of a fun, interesting thing about me is I used to be the former Chicago Sun-Times food critic, and I'm also a current dining contributor for Chicago Tribune Red Eye. So if anybody watching this webcast is hungry and they end up working with us, we'll make sure that you eat very well. Just a little bit about us as a company. Codifyd is a leading provider of end-to-end product content solutions. We were founded in 1999 here in Chicago. We have a European office in London outside Market Harborough. We have about 100-plus employees, but our main headquarters is still here in Chicago. We have a global customer base of manufacturers, distributors, and retailers. We have a lot of expensive domain expertise in MDM, e-commerce optimization, new product publishing, sourcing, onboarding, and technology enablement. We use on-site and offshore. Typically, most of our intelligence work is done on-site here in the United States, but we do mitigate some of that cost with some offshore resources as needed. Today we're going to talk about this idea of establishing gold content, or a single source of truth. Establishing a single source of truth in your business is sort of the holy grail of what's promised with any kind of MDM initiative or installing a new PIM system. What we know is that typically people end up starting on the very right-hand side of this spectrum, where you just go straight to the technology implementation, you start to look into the PIM. What we believe is that you need to start here at the left. We know that a PIM is very good as a repository for content. It has the intelligence to serve up a single source of truth, but it does not create the single source of truth. Ultimately, your organization needs to do that first by establishing business goals. What's important to your organization? Once you establish your business goals, then you need to start to create a level set of your content from all of your legacy systems. You have to establish a data model that's consistent. So what attributes do you need if you're dealing with product data? What are the restricted lists of values that apply to those attributes? What do you call those attributes? How do you rank them? You have to make a plan so that you can stick to that plan anytime you introduce new information or new products. Without a plan, you can introduce new information or new products any which way, and the data or the quality in your master data management system will devolve over time. And then once you create that plan, you need to put the people and processes in place to make sure that plan is governed. And once you do that, you've now achieved what we would call gold content, or the single source of truth. Once you do that, that's when you're ready to invest in technology implementation. So talking about gold content is maybe a little abstract. What do we mean by gold content? Ultimately, gold content is mutually exclusive and a consistent hierarchy, or a product hierarchy, or an informational hierarchy. We refer to it as taxonomy here at Codifyd. Ultimately, how you organize your products is really important. The goal here is to make sure that, or information as well. The goal here is to make sure that either a product or a piece of information has one logical home. Anytime you create a hierarchy where there might be two or more logical homes, that's what creates confusion for customers and users. And that's the kind of thing that you want to get away from when establishing golden content. Ultimately, too, you want to focus on creating that well-defined data model, the right attributes, the right rankings, the right values. You want to make sure that once you create that your data is normalized, it's consistent, and it's fully filled whenever possible according to that plan. You want to make sure that you have clear copy, images, and original collateral to support the merchandising of products or the explanation of products maybe to your key vendors if you're a manufacturer. And then again, you want to make sure you have some good workflow and some good governance to make sure that once you've created that golden content, it doesn't go awry. Ultimately, what we believe is the success or failure of your MDM implementation is dependent on gold content. So before we start out, one of the things we always hear about in establishing any MDM initiative is that people want to know about return on investment. And what we know from experience is that the approaches that we've taken, we've seen increases in, from anywhere from 37 to roughly 200% in revenue from year over year measurements when we've deployed some of our MDM solutions. We also know that we've improved findability for internal users. So if it's not a product-facing taxonomy, what we know is that if it's just about organizing information, we've reduced the number of hours that internal employees spend looking for it because it's much easier to find. Ultimately, you put these two things together, and what we believe is we provide a competitive advantage for your business. So this is just one example of a customer we had in the dental space. They had, on the left is their legacy data. They had 3,558 carbide burrs. They returned roughly 11 pages of product in those 3,000 burrs. They didn't have a lot of structured information. What they did have was descriptions, but even the descriptions weren't necessarily consistent. And what we did was we went in, we created a data model, a new hierarchy, a good plan for that information. Then we went out and filled that information consistently. And what we were able to do is create a situation on the left where instead of returning 11 product pages, where we saw customers opting out after looking at 2 pages, so they weren't even looking at maybe 9 pages of product, we were able to create this faceted or parametric search based on the attributes of the individual burrs, and we were able to do it with consistent structured data that we were able to establish in their MDM or PIM system. And what we saw is that when we did this, and we gave customers the ability to choose on all this standardized information and all this consistent quality data, they were seeing almost 40% sales growth month over month since we deployed the initiative. So let's talk a little bit about what an MDM initiative looks like, or what we see as the House of MDM. You start out with this idea of MDM and PIM software, but what goes into that MDM or PIM software system to drive it? The first thing we think about is, if you think about a house, probably one of the most important things in establishing the soundness of your house is the foundation. What we see in the foundation of an MDM or PIM software installation is your business goals that are driven and defined by your organization, as well as a foundational hierarchy and taxonomy, or a product hierarchy, or an informational hierarchy. That is sort of the bread and butter of any kind of MDM initiative. You want to get that right first before you start to build the rest of the software out and the rest of the house. Another thing we think about is, like, what's in the walls of a house? Obviously, plumbing, electricity. What is that like in our MDM or PIM system? We look at that as the data model, that plan for governing your information. And then, what's maybe in the living room in a typical house? We know we have furniture or different kinds of furniture. We liken furniture to new style products or individual data points and images. If you think about this model, the most costly thing to change is the foundation, i.e. your business goals and your foundational hierarchy. It's a little bit easier to change plumbing and electrical systems or your content and your data models. You might have to rip down some drywall to do that, but still it's relatively it's less expensive than, say, jacking up the house to change the entire foundation. And then finally, if you introduce new products or individual data points and new images, that's kind of more like moving furniture around in the house. Ultimately, that's not that costly, other than the fact that you have the physical labor of doing it. But you can do that without tearing down walls or repairing whole systems. And, we like to use the house model because if you think about it, you start to ask yourself, what happens if you have a bad electrical system? Obviously it can lend itself to a fire. If you have a bad plumbing system, you could have a hole in your ceiling and all of a sudden you have a huge leak and you got to call a plumber. Or even worse, if you have a bad foundation, you don't start with that good product hierarchy, all of a sudden your entire house crumbles and falls down. That's obviously an abstract metaphor, but the thing that we know is this has real application to what you as a manufacturer, what you as a product distributor do, and that is you have all these systems, and in establishing a master data management system and a single source of truth, all of your downstream systems assume one thing, and that's gold product content. Your channel partners, whether you're working with Amazon or eBay, expect good quality content from you, your websites, your mobile applications, certainly your print catalogs, and any financial or reporting systems as well. But what happens if your content isn't gold? Ultimately, if you look at across all these, one of the first things you notice is that you're going to lose sales from poor findability or giving poor information. Your channel partners may not want to work with you because you're not providing enough information to merchandise your product. Same thing on your website, same thing with a mobile application. In a print system, you print maybe an inaccurate catalog, which could lead to returns on products and, again, lost sales. And then, of course, in your downstream systems, you may not be able to report on the things that are important to you, to negotiate with suppliers on margin or other financial implications for your business. So if we believe that gold content is really important and it's fundamental to your business, why aren't people talking about it, or why isn't this a bigger thing? And one of those reasons is we think there are a lot of myths that are out there. And, you know, what we want to do is kind of dispel a little bit or get you thinking about those myths and why they're not true, so that as you start an MDM initiative, you could push through those and get yourself in a right position to establish gold content. One of the things we hear is the reason people don't focus on taxonomy as a foundational idea is that often the software providers will say, don't worry, you can put in a new taxonomy or a data structure later. You can define those business goals later. Another thing is they're like, we can help you with hierarchy. We have it built into our system. Why isn't data always good? We hear, well, you have a data quality tool. We can clean your data. Now, if we take a look at the contention that you can add a new taxonomy or data structure later, we return back to this house metaphor, and if you look at these two pictures, which one of these is going to be easier to install a new electrical system in? Or if you extrapolate it into a new taxonomy or a new data structure, obviously the one where the walls are still open. If you have to install it into a PIM system that's already established, that's kind of like ripping down drywall to put in a new taxonomy. You want to make that investment before you invest in the technology. Ultimately, fix your content before you build your software out. Trying to force fitting revised content after an MDM deployment results in increased costs and resources. And you don't want to let your IT or software vendor dictate the timeline. What we know, of course, is that IT departments often initiate these PIM or MDM management initiatives, but the reality is they impact the entire business, and the entire business has to come along at the same time. So often when software vendors say, we'll help you with hierarchy, you know, it's true. Some MDM systems have built-in standard hierarchies like UNSPSC, WAND, or E-Class. But, you know, they're not usually appropriate or specific enough to your business to merchandise products or information correctly. Ultimately, we also see is that as a business, you have multiple legacy hierarchies with no good plan for reconciliation. So you might have 3 different systems or 3 different hierarchies. If you put those things together without some kind of thought and a plan, it turns into a little bit of a mess. We also know we have 9 best practices here at Codifyd that we use, and we often see that those hierarchies from the legacy systems are not grounded in best practices. This is just an example of something we see in the real world, which is we had a customer who was establishing a new central source of truth, and they took all the taxonomy from their product hierarchy from their legacy systems, and they had 101 unreadable choices. This is only a small fraction of what they had on the left, but what we did is we took our best practice, we made some consolidations, and we represented these 101 items with these 6 categories. Now, that might seem pretty extreme, but actually what we see is that we've seen sales increases by using the hierarchy, top-level hierarchy on the right over the left-hand side. That's been pretty significant over the last few years since we deployed this solution. This is the kind of opportunity and the kind of thing that Codifyd can do to work with the client to level set before you install a new PIM system. Obviously, there's a lot more maintenance in the 101 categories than there are in the 6. And that's also going to be a cost to your business down the line. So again, one of the things we said was a myth is that PIM systems or MDM tools have a DQ tool. They can clean your data. This is another output that we've seen in a recent PIM implementation. These are all the same products. But there's 7 different ways that an attribute is represented. Now, PIM systems do have DQ tools. They're really good at doing unit of measure, normalization, numbering, and spelling that's consistent. What they typically don't do is they don't create a schema model or a plan to make sure your data is governed and doesn't devolve in the future. They don't set up restricted LOVs or normalize those LOVs. DQ tools also can't see what specific information might be missing. They don't really understand the particulars of your technical data. They don't really know how to deal with removing technical jargon, et cetera. And so what you see here is that you have pound and the number sign. It's the same idea. They're not normalized. That's something that we would do in any initiative. You also see their spacing variant. Sometimes there's a space between pounds, sometimes there's not. Obviously, these are the same values. You want them to be formatted the same so that your business can report on these things as equals, or that customers can find them to compare and contrast what they're looking for. Another thing, really this attribute is called material, but it's really the paperweight and the color. If we were to go in and build a data model, we would create those 2 new attributes so that if somebody came in and said, how much white paper do we sell, or how much 20 bound paper we sell, they can actually go in and do that. That would be difficult today because this information would be buried under an attribute called material. So that's a very detailed or specific idea of schema, but at a very high level, what is a good schema and what do we do, or how do we build a data model or data plan that will help create golden content for your business? You want to have a focus on the right number of attributes with display ranks, navigation ranks, with a consistent definition. You want to create a data type. Is it text or numeric? You want to have a restricted list of values. If a vendor says stainless, another one says stainless steel, and another one says SS, which is the right value? Is it stainless steel? Everything should be normalized to that. If it's numbers, you might just have sample values so people can see the format. Is it fractional? What are the acceptable units of measure? Is it inch or inch sign or INCH? Create that plan, govern your data, and you will have gold content. Ultimately, not only is establishing gold content important from a data quality standpoint, a normalization standpoint, or a taxonomy standpoint, but one of the questions we often get is, how did we get here? Why did we get to this place in our organization? And what we know is that siloed departments often create the need for an MDM solution. But that being said, if you establish or you create a PIM system without level setting your content, you have a system of record, but that doesn't mean you've agreed upon a central single source of your truth. Each of those departments will set up their own data models, their own product hierarchies, their own informational way of organizing. Ultimately, that'll lead to interdepartmental misconception and politics, which cause delay. That's why we know, and what is critical is that if an IT department is driving your MDM initiative, but your content departments or your HR departments or your finance departments are dependent on this information, they have to be involved as well. So what we believe is you need to have a cross-functional executive get involved, somebody who's higher above the business, who can cut across those different silos and get them to work together. That being said, even if you have the best cross-functional executive, you don't want to solely rely on that executive to do enforcement, nor do you want to rely on the best practice. So obviously we have a lot of methodology and best practice that we use at at Codifyd, but we use third-party validation as well, and some metrics and some testing to validate that information, so we're not just working in theory or time-tested practice, but we're working with what your customers can tell you. So this is an example of a recent customer. On the left is we basically took their legacy taxonomy or legacy product hierarchy, and then we created our own best practice taxonomy or hierarchy. And we basically ran their customers through a bunch of product buying scenarios according to the old and the new product hierarchies. And what we found here is when we ran them through these scenarios and we asked customers to find things in the old, in particular scenarios, they only had a 38% success rate of finding that product, and it took them about 33 seconds. When we deployed our new best practices scenario, we found that we had a success rate of about 73%, and it only took about 14.1 seconds, or significantly less than half the time to find what they were looking for. These are the kind of results we typically see to validate our best practice. They don't always work, and if it goes the opposite way, then we'll honor the opinion of the business or the silo based on what we tested out on. But often what we find is that if you do this kind of third-party testing, you can often cut through those politics and you can establish gold content in a way that everybody's happy with. So ultimately, in conclusion, what do you need to do? Again, you want to establish your business goals that drive sound governed taxonomy, hierarchy, and quality content. What is important in your business? If you don't know what's important in your business, just investing in a PIM or an MDM can often be a wasted initiative or a wasted amount of money. Likewise, you may not invest in the best PIM system, because if you know what's important in your business, you can pick a PIM system that has the right functionalities that meets what you need, and not just rely on a generic system or a generic setup to get going. But ultimately, once you define those business goals, you want to level set all your legacy content from all your legacy systems. You want to build a data model that governs soundly how that data is built from time to time. As new products are introduced or new information is introduced, you build according to that plan, and your information and your investment stays consistent. And then ultimately, you put in people and process in place, people above the organization who can enforce that consistency and enforce that plan. If the plan needs to be changed, they smartly agree on how it should be changed, so it doesn't change significantly over time, where you have to go back and level set once again. And then ultimately, you do that, you have this gold content or this single source of truth. If you do that, then you're ready to invest in this technology implementation. And finally, just to restate, ultimately, we believe the success or failure of your MDM initiative is dependent on establishing gold content before technology implementation. We believe that if you follow these ideas and you establish gold content, your MDM implementation will not look like this house falling into the sea, but instead this beautiful home, this sort of shining beacon on the hill. And that's the kind of MDM initiative we want for you. Ultimately, you might be asking yourself after hearing this, how do I even get started? I have all these moving parts. I have a lot of silos in my business. Where would I even start? Typically with Codifyd, we have a foundational audit that we provide to our customers and our clients that has been really effective over time to get the ball rolling on any MDM initiative. We'll do a business needs analysis. We start to ask those questions about, do you have a product induction problem? Are you having a hard time finding information? Are you wasting hours looking for products? Are your customers not having high conversion rates? What does your business need to solve? Then we'll go into competitive analysis and benchmark you against the key people in your industry. We'll do a content audit. We'll look at your images, the quality of your data. We'll look at your taxonomies, your product hierarchies. We'll look at pretty much everything you do to merchandise information or sell product. We'll also do a search audit. We'll look at your algorithms for whatever e-commerce packages you're using. Are they tuned correctly? Is there a better way to go? Do you have a good manual tuning program set up to handle exceptions? We'll also go through a product content process where we look at how long it takes for you to bring product or information to market. We've been really effective at reducing time to market by as much as 50% or more, and we believe we can help with that. We'll also see how you're governing information in your business. And we'll also go into a technology audit. We have a methodology for evaluating PIM systems that allows us to interview you and see what's important to your business, create a weighted system so that you can evaluate PIM vendors according to that weighted system. What we found is that often you may have a preference about what PIM you believe that you want to use, and then you use this methodology and you find agnostically that there's a PIM that's out there that's better for you from a different vendor. But that being said, we really appreciate your time today. And for more information ultimately about Codifyd and Codifyd's foundational audit, or find more information about what we're talking about here today, please contact us at codifyd.com or sales@codifyd.com.